Hey guys, welcome back. So today we want to talk about two things that have happened in the firearms community in the past week or so. First of all, we got a very good ruling out of the Supreme Court, which will buttress our Second Amendment rights. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we had something negative happen, and that was a bipartisan effort to pass anti-gun laws that garnered the support of 29 Republicans crossing from the House to the Senate. And we'll break those names down and who they are. I'll post the names in this video so you'll know who is responsible for crossing party lines to vote against your Second Amendment rights. Today, Jason joins us.
Hey, guys.
And stepping out from behind the camera to have this conversation. So let's start off with the good news. So originally, one of the most incredible cases in my lifetime was the Heller decision. And we had a chance to meet Heller at that Washington, D.C. rally a few years back.
Yeah, we did.
And what a great man. Mm-hmm. But his Supreme Court ruling basically said that he was allowed to have a firearm in his home, and the government couldn't stop that. It would be against the Second Amendment. That ruling stopped short of saying that he could carry a concealed weapon out into the streets of his hometown or wherever he wanted to go, right? So that ruling stopped short of that, but it was still a big victory for us in the Second Amendment community. But again, the question became whether or not states can limit your right to carry a firearm on your person to exercise the right to self-defense. So you had different states like New York State and California that had varying laws that were much more restrictive than, say, where we live, where we now have constitutional carry. Right. So in our state and 24 others, I think at this point, maybe it's 25, you don't have to have a license. You just have to be a citizen of the state, and you are granted permission to carry a concealed weapon. You don't need a separate permit or pay a tax or ask anybody's permission. Well, in New York and California, they are a may issue. So there's shall issue and may issue. And the issue of may issue is what was decided when we're talking about the Supreme Court case of the New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. And this is the Supreme Court case that just got decided, handed down in the last few days, that said, look, the Second Amendment doesn't just protect your right to have a gun in your home. It protects your right to carry a firearm at any time to protect your life and the lives of others, depending on whatever the various state laws are. And the states can't restrict access to that by putting unreasonable hurdles between you and obtaining a license. And that's what the whole case was centered around. So in places like New York City, you had to prove to some bureaucrat that you had a need to self-defense. Let's say you were just, a lady in her 20s that works in a bad side of town and has to walk to her car at night after her shift. You needed to prove to somebody that you really were in need of a handgun to defend yourself. And almost more often than not, you would get denied. They just didn't want people with carry permits or people being able to defend themselves.
Of course, you were high up along with that bureaucrat. If you were maybe friends with them or something, you were probably guaranteed to get what you wanted. But,
yes,
some lowly that actually needs it, no.
Celebrities, politicians, the elites, of course, had their guns and their armed bodyguards, but the peons, the plebes, the unwashed were denied access in these areas. So this case makes, so I made that distinction earlier, may issue versus shall issue. So Indiana, prior to becoming a constitutional carry state, was a shall issue state. And what does that mean? It means that the state, unless they have reason to deny you a handgun, must give you one. Right. So if you're a prohibited person, you're a former bank robber, murderer, whatever, and you're prohibited by federal law, you would not be granted a permit in the state of Indiana under the permitting system. And Indiana's permitting system goes back to the 30s. It's one of the oldest in the country. Mm-hmm. And but we've washed all that away. But that's the way it's typically been. The burden of proof was on the government as to why they would deny you access to a firearm in most states that were shall issue. So you had to be a prohibited person, basically. Otherwise, everybody got a permit that applied for one. May issue leaves it up to bureaucrats to decide whether or not you're going to get a gun. So if you lived in California, unless you're a celebrity, politically connected, whatever, no guns for you. Too bad. But if you live in a gated community, you work in Hollywood, you know all the right people, and you grease the right palms, hey, you can have all the guns you want.
Oh, yeah.
Nancy Pelosi has a gun, we found out. So that was the really big decision that came down. So this is going to have a rippling effect across not just New York now. Now that opens the floodgates for any of the other states that, willfully deny the citizens their access to their firearms and their Second Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. It's been struck down. So that's really, really good news. That's a huge step in the right direction. But almost immediately, we had the Senate. So Mitch McConnell decided to tell the Senate Republicans, go sit down with the Democrats and come up with some gun control legislation based upon the Brooklyn shootings and the Verde shooting, right? And so he instructed Republicans, find some compromise, go sit in a room, figure this out, come back with a bill that we can pass, that would get past the filibuster 60 vote, requirement. And that's precisely what they did. So Mitch McConnell, and it turned out originally, last time we spoke about this, it was 10 Republicans, which was just enough to get them over the line to pass the legislation in the Senate. That turned into 15, counting old Mitch himself. And one of those traitors is right here in the state of Indiana in the Senate, and that is Senator Young. Mm-hmm. Senator Young voted to pass this legislation. Senator Braun did not. And I knew Senator Braun wouldn't. He's a very, very strong pro-2A guy. Mm-hmm. And I hope he runs for governor here in Indiana. So now we had this, I don't know, it's knee-jerk reaction stuff, right? So for 28 years, we've not seen the federal government pass any substantial anti-gun measures, right? So for all the parties involved in this, they're heralding it as some great victory that's going to save lives. But when you actually look at what is in the law, there's nothing really there that would have changed the outcome of any of the recent shootings. No. It's just more feel-good legislation. And it's they neutered it enough to get the Republicans on board so the Democrats could claim victory. What's not included in this bill is an assault weapons ban, a magazine ban, a ban of 18 to 21-year-olds from owning firearms. They didn't get any of that into this bill. So let's talk a little bit about what they did get into the bill. So the bill enhances background checks for gun buyers between 18 and 21. Now, the document, I believe, is like 108 pages. I haven't had a chance. I was out sick last week, but I haven't had a chance to read the entire bill. But this looks as though it's going to dig into juvenile records, expand the NICS background check system so that they can go into your behavior when you were, between 18 and 21 and do extended background checks, whatever that means. I don't know what the verbiage is.
So if you fall in that category of 18 to 21, you get some additional screening on your NICS check potentially, or are they going to, no matter even 35, 40, 52, 68, 90 years old, try to dig back into your 18 to 21-year-old life and see if they can deny you something maybe based off of that time frame? You know what I mean? I don't know exactly what it is they're going to dig up. Like you say, juvenile records maybe?
What are they doing? Yeah.
That wouldn't have stopped anything.
No. So if you take a look at the Texas shooting, the school had social media monitoring programs that they were paying for to actively monitor social media posts. And I first learned of these applications and services just recently. So a lot of schools do that. They pay these third parties to scan the social media of their students and look for any, thing that might pop up and cause them concern. Apparently this system failed them. We already know that the shooter was active on social media, was calling himself a school shooter, was saying basically, I'm leaving now to go shoot people. And yet nobody did anything, including either retired or I don't think he was actively working anymore, but a former law enforcement officer was actually in the chat room watching this take place with other people kind of goading the kid on to go do it. This new law really wouldn't have changed anything. The reason being is he had no criminal background. We already know that. He had a squeaky clean background. So it's a false sense of security. These background checks, first of all, I think they're unconstitutional. I think background checks should be thrown out because even at Copper, how often do we see people come in that get a false positive? It's far more false positives than actual denials for legitimate criminals.
And then, of course, the appeal process isn't like a day. No. It's like a year or more potentially for an appeal process to get your name cleared. So basically, you're denied your Second Amendment rights while waiting on this appeal process. You know what I mean? For, like you say, a false positive, if you will, or a denial, if you will. So it's
like in states like Indiana, if you go through a divorce, you better get a good divorce attorney if you're a male, because almost instantly the female can slap an order of protection on you at the moment of filing for divorce, and you don't even know it. And we've had customers come in, good customers, and they get denied a purchase. And you have to dig in as to why, because the person on the phone's not going to tell you anything.
Nope.
And so do a little bit of digging, and we've told them, are you going through divorce? Yeah, you might want to go talk to your attorney. There's a chance there's an order of protection against you. And sure enough, that's what it is. And that type of stuff is an abuse of the system. Because if the woman has no reason to do this, and I've been told that it automatically triggers in certain cases, even whether or not the female asks for it or not, the man gets an order of protection slapped against him while the divorce is going on. So, those laws vary from state to state, but when you start expanding background checks, basically what you're doing is expanding the harassment of people and digging into stuff, and they keep changing, moving the goalposts as to what would prohibit you from owning a firearm. And that's the danger of these bills, right? It's that incrementalism. It's like we just get our foot in the door. Oh, it seems totally reasonable, man. We just want to do a little extra checking on the 18 to 21-year-olds. I'm like, man, we had another shooting. We got to do a little more checking. We got to buttress this law a little bit more. Next thing you know, you can't get a firearm for any reason because you can't pass a background check because you farted in public 2 years ago and got a misdemeanor. So that is the danger of that particular piece. I don't like the fact that they're going to harass 18 to 21-year-olds, and you're talking about the same group of people that fight our wars.
Oh yeah,
right. They can't enjoy a drink. They can't do a lot of things. A lot of their constitutional rights are suspended. Not a lot, a few, until they reach 21. But at 18, 17, with your parents' consent, they can stick you in a war zone, give you a rifle, and tell you go over there and kill or be killed.
I'm going to shift off just a little bit, just based off the recruitment. As a matter of fact, I had read somewhere that recruitment right now is down.
It is.
Because of the wokeism that has been taking place in the military. Most of your people that fight wars are, good old country boys and girls that have been raised in the woods shooting guns, fishing, hunting, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And to look at what's going on in the military right now, it's like, I don't want to sign up for that. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, you know what I read in the news this morning? The U.S. Army just dropped the requirement to have a high school diploma for recruitment.
Oh, so they're shifting those standards lower and lower, I see.
Yep. It's funny because years ago people used to say the Marines would just take anybody, the old stories of either go to prison or go to the Marine Corps type of thing. The Marines had very, very high standards for recruitment. They were one of the first branches to demand that you actually have a high school diploma before they would even consider you for enlistment. So
right.
Now we see, just like you said, all this craziness going on, but that's a different topic.
That's what I'm saying. There's all sorts of topics you can go, but all right, continue on. What else is included in this? Piece of legislation.
It provides for billions of unspecified dollars for health services. Right, so it has $15 billion in federal funding for mental health programs, and then dovetails that into school security updates. So $15 billion, and they're going to split that between mental health services and providing school security for roughly 25,000 schools in the United States. $15 billion for something that might actually make a difference, security in the school.
Right, security in the schools.
$15 billion.
Education, and all that other good stuff, yeah.
A half of that or whatever is some of it's going to go to mental health. I guess maybe we're bringing back mental institutions. And then the other half presumably is going to schools to increase the security. Something that would actually make a difference, they underfunded.
Yeah. I mean, well, because they know for a fact that none of this stuff is, this, like you said, this is all feel-good stuff, right? $15 billion, really? I'm pretty sure they gave that yesterday to Ukraine. You know what I mean? Like, on a daily basis. So it's like $15 billion is in a 330 million people in the United States. How many schools there are? Cut that in half. Yada yada yada. What are they going to get? Like $1,000 each, or so? What I'm getting at is the money isn't going to go as far with 7.5 billion roughly.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's chump change.
They keep screeching, we need to save the children. It's all about the children. But when it comes down to actually doing something that would save children, and look, Israel did this. They had their schools being attacked all the time. What did they do? They put armed guards in there, made single points of entry. They do, metal detector scanning and stuff like that. But the key element there being they have armed guards. It's a suicide mission to attack one of their schools.
Yeah.
We have better security for our politicians, like Elizabeth Warren, who introduces a bill to make it illegal to fund school security. She literally did that. That's what we focus on over here. So when we have the opportunity to do something that might actually stem this violence that Hollywood, in my opinion, helped create, the Hollywood glorifying violence, Hollywood making it cool to solve all your problems with a gun in the street and, whatever. Hollywood has a piece of that blood on their hands as well. We really had an opportunity to do something here that would have made a difference, and that was to secure our schools, make it, so at least provide our schools the same level of security we support and supply our politicians with.
Right.
Right.
Well, it makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't do it. They underfunded it. And instead they focused on this background check because they want to get their fingers and hooks into as much personal information as they can about you. Because down the road, we already know the ATF is keeping an illegal database of gun owners. That's already leaked multiple times. It's federally illegal for them to do it, but there's no accountability in this government anymore.
Right.
Agencies routinely break their own laws. Who's going to hold them accountable?
I think what a lot of people misunderstand is, whenever an inspector or anything like that comes in, they get an entire copy of the books.
Yeah.
Out, in, you name it, they got it. They get a copy of it, and it's theirs. They upload it. They have it. What do they do with it? They're not going to tell you. So what do you think that is? They keep inspecting FFLs, these 4473 data with all your information going in there. There is a database out there.
Absolutely there
and
is.
like you said, they have admitted to
it's been
They've
proved.
admitted to it that it's searchable. You know what I mean?
It's not even debatable. Yeah.
Right.
It's fact that they're doing this.
Exactly.
Against federal law.
Exactly.
So there's no accountability there. So, the mental services, I'm not sure what that entails. I certainly don't want to see institutions brought back where, you lock people up against their will and things like that. And I think part of this mental health services dovetails into another key component of this bill, and that's the funding of assisting the states to pass red flag laws. And the red flag law, in essence, creates a star chamber. So you have this judge in secrecy and an accuser in secrecy conspiring against you to say you're a lunatic and you need to have your guns taken away. And then this star chamber judge goes, based upon the testimony of this one person, could be your wife, could be a sibling that's pissed about being, grounded for a week, could be an extra neighbor. And the judge goes, okay, take his guns away and then we'll settle this in court. So why is that a problem? That's because there's a little thing in this country called due process. And you cannot, first of all, you have every right to face your accuser. So one showing up in a star chamber you don't even know is taking place denies you that basic right. You have a right to be secure in your persons and property. A star chamber judge taking, hearsay evidence from somebody that might have a bone to pick with you, and then using that to get the police to come kick in your door and take your guns away from you, and then decide it in court whether or not you're worthy of owning your guns or not, all because somebody got angry, which is how it's going to be used. It's already being used like that because we have states that have red flag laws. Now, what this federal bill doesn't do is make a federal red flag law, right? What it does is create a budget to incentivize states to pass similar laws. So each state's going to have a different law. Illinois is going to be horrific, I can only imagine. California's will be horrific if they already have it. New York's will be horrific, right? They'll just use it to take guns away from people, carte blanche, just take them away.
Right.
And, the states can write those laws. Some states write them in such a way that you have, once they take the gun, in 2 weeks, a judge has to decide whether or not you get your guns back. And if 2 weeks pass and the judge doesn't do something, you just automatically get your guns back. I think that's how it works in Indiana. They have 2 weeks to resolve it. But other states can just make it indefinite. We're just going to take your guns away, and then we'll just let it work through the court system, which could take up to a year.
I know. And if anybody, listening to this has ever dealt with the court systems, it is not some kind of everybody has a smiley face and is there to help you. As a matter of fact, it's a nightmare. Yeah. It's a nightmare to navigate the court system. And even like attorneys. Generally, when you call an attorney's office, you get some secretary there. Oh, they're busy. Oh, they're out. Oh, they're this. Oh, they're that. And you never get any answers from anybody.
Right.
And even though you're paying this person to represent you, and then the court, a little bit later, we'll hear that later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can go on forever.
You bring up a great point. So let's say that somebody falsely accuses you of something in the Star Chamber and you get your guns taken away, the court says, oh, you know what, that was, we found that evidence isn't sufficient. We're going to return your firearms. Okay, who's paying for my attorney's bill? And what damages am I going to get because this person clearly lied to jam me up because they want to punish me because we're getting a divorce or we broke up, whatever.
Thousands of dollars, mind you.
Yes, thousands of dollars. The stigma that goes along with it. You could very easily lose your job if this person takes to the Facebook and starts bombarding your employer with saying they took his guns away because he's crazy. I mean, all sorts of stuff happens because of this that is negative, that doesn't stop a shooter from doing anything. So almost every single case where we've seen a school shooter or a mass shooter of any type, they've already signaled their intentions. They've already broken laws. They've already done something that was actionable, and yet nothing happened. It's no different than 9/11. The FBI knew full well what was going on with those pilots because they were warned, yet they did nothing. And this is the problem in the United States. Passing more laws doesn't do anything except harass people when they want to harass you. So if you're singled out politically, then we can use this law to harass you. Otherwise, 99% of the time, we're just going to ignore the law.
That's the problem with a lot of this stuff. It's like you said, there was signs for a lot of these shooters out there. There was plenty of signs out there, and just nothing was done about it. As a matter of fact, as more and more time goes on here, the more information that you hear out of that Texas thing, it's pretty disgusting as to what has gone done. Not just, the shooter, but as far as the response, as far as what was done on scene, as far as everything.
Yeah.
Like
it was cascading events that just one event made it worse than the previous, and it just kept cascading, getting worse and worse and worse.
You have people stopping people from going in that school they wanted to take action. They wanted to put an end to this, and they're being slammed to the ground and arrested for interfering with whatever it may be while they're all just begging for something. The more information that comes out of this, it is really disturbing as to what went down.
And see, here's another thing about some of these laws that we're talking about, like the one that Bill Biden just signed and other laws. The police have no legal obligation to protect you or your family. That's been decided by the courts. So if you call 911 and you say there's somebody breaking into my house and it takes them 45 minutes to get there, and one of all your family members gets killed or something really bad happens, and you survive, you can't bring charges against the police department. It's already been decided that they have no obligation to protect you. Yet these anti-gunners want to take your guns away from you. They want to go so far as to ban body armor. That's a thing now. So you don't have passive protection nor active protection, passive being body armor and active being a firearm. They want to completely make you a sheep.
Yeah, defund the police in areas, disarm the populace, no way to protect yourself whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're already seeing a lot of, their actions in like Seattle and things of that nature, where their defund was a big movement there. And as a matter of fact, they went as far as to do it. And now it's just this crime-riddled psycho zone out there right now that they can't get under control.
Right. Did you hear what Los Angeles just did?
No.
Los Angeles just decided to significantly reduce the budget of the sheriff's department and get rid of deputized law enforcement that's armed and replace them with 30 crisis managers that are going to go into these bad areas of Los Angeles County. And it was kind of like the park ranger idea. I think Washington State was trying to.
So when they all eventually, I guess, get shot and killed, who's going to sign up for that job?
Right?
You know what I mean?
It's like, hi, I'm here. I see that you're holding a knife to your wife's throat. Can we not do that? Let's talk about this. I've brought a puppy. You want to pet my puppy? It's total insanity.
I know.
Total insanity, including this bill that Biden just signed into law, and they're holding it up as some holy grail of greatness that they've done. 30 years, we've not been able to pass substantial gun control.
I know.
And really,
it's pandering to their audience. You know what I mean? That's all this is.
It is.
And they're going to do, I think, more in stages. I think this is, like you said, we are always the ones giving things up in very small amounts, incrementalism, death by 1,000 paper cuts, whatever it may be. We never get anything in return, but they always take. And this right here, they got their little step, and 15 Republicans signed in on this thing. Now there'll be another step and another step and
because
another
there's
stab.
always going to be another tragedy. And that's the unfortunate part of being human. Throughout human history, there have been murderers, there have been rapists, there have been burglars, thieves. I mean, that's just the fact of life. There's no law you're going to pass that's going to magically make crime go away or make people stop hurting each other. There just isn't. Yeah. And when you keep adding law upon law upon law that doesn't go enforced, what's the point? What is the point? Because they said that they're going to buttress gun trafficking laws and defining what an FFL is. You know what that means, right? That means, Jason, you know what? You bought 5 too many guns this year. You're dealing without a license, and now you're going to stand trial for it. That's what that means. Redefining what an FFL is and who needs one.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's people don't look at it like that. They think that, oh, this is fairly harmless. And this is what the Republicans were banking on. It's fairly harmless. You know, mental health, okay, who can be opposed to that? School security, most rational people would be in favor of that. Background checks, yeah, that seems reasonable to most people. We got to know who's buying a gun. You know, we're going to close the boyfriend loophole. That's another one that was a provision of this law, which basically said if you're a boyfriend of a female, they call it the boyfriend law. They want to, you know, detach sex from everything, and everything's either non-binary or whatever, and everybody has their own pronouns, but they call this, the people who authored this, the boyfriend loophole. So if you're dating somebody and you're convicted of domestic abuse, that will carry over for the rest of your life versus just being a spouse, right? So it used to be that if you were a spouse and convicted of domestic abuse, then you would lose your rights to firearm. Now you can just be cohabitating, and the other one makes an accusation, and then you lose your rights again. So
interesting.
Yeah. So that's another one of the provisions of this law, which, again, it just sets the stage for what we all already know is going to happen, and we saw it happen during the COVID pandemic. People turning their neighbors in. I know police departments were inundated with phone calls. So-and-so's walking down the street and they're standing in close proximity to another person. Neither one of them have a mask on. Can you please send somebody over here right now?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a Stasi state, man.
Yep. You wouldn't believe how many people are probably willing to either turn you in or put their boot to your throat than you think. You know what I mean? Like, it's quite impressive how many people are out there that are just downright crazy.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, none of these laws that they pass are going to do, you know, anything. None of it's going to do anything. And, you know, as far as that, the pro portion of it, at the beginning of this video, the permitting and licensing and all that stuff, I remember there was a retired police officer that I took a phone call on, and he wanted to know if we had a certain firearm in stock, because now that they're passing this constitutional carry, every knucklehead's going to have a gun, and he should probably have one. That was the actual conversation. I sat there, I was like, everybody kind of already has a gun that, you know, is going to have a gun here. Like, did you think that all of a sudden this is going to be free will for criminals? If they want a gun, they're going to find a way to get one no matter what laws you pass. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
nothing's changing in the state of Indiana.
Yeah. So
nothing.
I mean,
they don't enforce the permitting anyway.
I know.
I've known people, the 20-some years I've lived here, they've carried guns concealed without a permit because the police just don't care, because the permit's a joke. It's literally a joke. It's a tax generator. That's all it's ever been. No picture, no testing requirements, no fingerprints, nothing.
They
but
did do fingerprints. You did have to do it.
Well, you have to submit them, but it's not on. There's nothing to identify the card carrier other than a name.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I'm saying. So the one time that I was pumping gas, you know, in the Jeep, and I had a shirt on, but my gun was openly exposed going to the range. I was just pumping some gas, and a state trooper says, "Hey, can you cover that up?" And he was smiling, so I was smiling, and I've told this story before. And I said, "Well, why don't you cover yours up?" He goes, "Oh, come on, man, it's not the same thing." And I said, "It absolutely is the same thing." He goes, "Well, you're going to scare some little old lady." I said, "Well, you're going to scare some little old lady." He's like, "All right, have a nice day. Do you have a permit?" Like, "Yep." He's like, "All right," and just went about his business. Didn't even ask to see the permit. They don't care. They've never cared here. It's just for tax generation, much like speeding tickets. So that's why constitutional carry isn't going to change one thing in this state. Not one thing. In terms, well, it is. It's going to give freedom back to the people, but it's not going to be dangerous for police.
You know what he was after, I think? I think he was after preventing a phone call to the police department. I think
probably.
that's what he was after.
He wasn't being mean-spirited,
Right.
and I mean, it was tongue-in-cheek. We were cordial to each other. We were kind of laughing at each other's responses.
Because the more people that have moved to this, county, because we talk to a lot of police officers around here. A lot of them are customers at the store here. And we talk to them, and it's like they get calls all the time from new people that move to the area. I hear gunfire. There's gunfire taking place. And they're like, yes, there are people that legally own guns and shoot them.
And people open carry here.
Right.
And they'll get that phone call. There's a person walking down the street with a gun.
Exactly.
Are they waving it around? No. Are they threatening anybody? No. Well, what are they doing with the gun? Nothing. They're just walking.
Yeah, they're just walking. And they have it.
You do understand they have a right to do that in this state, right? Can't you send a police officer? This could be a killer.
Yep.
It's like, it is, unless they're doing something wrong, we're not going to dispatch an officer because they're not breaking any laws. Yep. And, I go back and forth in the summer. I generally conceal, but sometimes I open carry, especially when we're running around the property and stuff. And after we're done, we go grab lunch. I'm open carrying. And it's a non-issue in the state. I've never, except for that one time, has a law enforcement officer just jokingly asked me if I had a permit, and asked that I cover it up. Yep. That's it. So
rather interesting.
It is, but every state's going to be a little bit different, and that's what's unfortunate. And with the government funding these red flag laws, again, each state's going to be able to draft their own. I don't know if this is like in campaign contributions, or they say it's going to help fund these laws. I don't know what that means. How they're going to help fund the passage of these laws. That sounds like political money to me, which would be questionable. But so each state's just going
to disappear into some pockets somewhere,
like the COVID money,
whatever. It's all just going to disappear, and others are going to be rich off of it or whatever it is. And I kind of wanted to bring it back to the pandemic purchasing days when everybody was just buying a gun. Everybody, you know what I mean? Tons of new gun owners out there, and I'll never forget one that was saying, I'm, getting this because it's really dangerous. I drive back and forth to Chicago. And I'm like, do you know the laws in Chicago in terms of, well, I'm from, Indiana. I have my permit. I'm like, nah. And that's kind of the craziness about this is we have an app that we use that try to guide us because we travel a lot, because having, not only are the laws in each state different, there's some counties, there are some cities within those counties that all have their own laws, and trying to keep up with this stuff as a gun owner carrying a firearm
across state lines.
You could go across state lines into a particular county, into a particular city, and get your face smashed into the concrete because they have some kind of anti-gun law that you had no idea about. Right. You know what I mean?
So in Indiana, to that point, in Indiana, we can carry guns into bars. There's no legal
They can have a no-gun sign at their door, and we don't necessarily have to.
But does not carry the weight of law.
If they ask you to leave, you have to leave.
You have to leave because that becomes a matter of trespass. But we can ignore no gun signs, except for federal buildings and courthouses and things like that. But we can ignore no gun signs. And people have said that this, if you have a state like ours, where literally there's no real enforcement of concealed carry or carry. It doesn't carry the weight of law to put a no gun sign on a door, anything. People say, well, if you do that, there's just going to be running gun battles in the streets. And yet here's a state like Indiana. Now, Indianapolis, it always seems like it's the big cities that suffer from the gang problems, the drug problems, and the violence that's associated with them. But the entire county, the countries, and the smaller areas, the southern parts, downstate Illinois and stuff like that aren't, out of the influence of Chicago, there's not running gun battles. There are more guns in American hands right now than any other point in American history. In part due to Obama, one of the greatest gun salesmen ever, and then in part due to the last 3 years of COVID and people realizing, oh my gosh, the government's not going to be here to protect me. I may actually have to fend for myself.
Right.
And so with the increase of this, when people say, well, look at this, the crime and violence is skyrocketing and blah, blah, blah. That has nothing to do with legal gun ownership. That has everything to do with local laws and policies, right? And that gets back to what you were saying. When we travel in Indiana, I don't have to worry about drinking. I don't drink, but I can have a beer and have a gun on. I'm not breaking a law. If I go down to Kentucky, I don't know, but it's one of the southern states, Kentucky or Tennessee, they have a rule in place where if the establishment makes so much of its income from the sale of alcohol, you can't carry a concealed weapon into the establishment by state law. And I always thought that was funny because at no time have I ever walked into any of those businesses and outside it says 39% of our revenue is generated from the sale of alcohol. The rest is generated from the sale of appetizers and main courses. Like, how do you know?
I know. And that's why I kind of, was talking about this, and that's why the importance for driving constitutional carry for not just, our state, but the whole United States.
Right.
You know what I mean? The fact of the matter is, my driver's license, I can drive to all 50 states, no problem whatsoever, right? With this constitutional carry only makes sense. When I cross this line, this imaginary line,
right,
all of a sudden there's this whole set of rules that I now have to follow. And most of these gun owners that purchased, new gun owners, had no idea.
No.
This person was fully content with driving this thing and sitting right in the center console driving into Illinois. And I'm like, unfortunately, there is some state trooper out there that is just grinding their teeth right now to get a hold of you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And they will charge you with a felony and you'll
Yep.
lose your right to own a gun in your own state.
Yep.
And that's the danger of these individual state laws and the fact that, and that's why I like to see the Supreme Court, one case at a time, reaffirming our right to self-defense, because it will come up at some point, hopefully soon, with this court, where somebody was charged because they crossed that imaginary line, perfectly licensed in their own state, let's say, clean record, not a prohibited person, but they just got lost and crossed a state line, got pulled over, and now they're jammed up with a felony weapons possession charge.
Isn't there somebody in like not near an airport or something, in New Jersey or something like that got jammed up? There was something that happened. It made the news all over the place. It was either a soldier or something like that had a firearm somewhere. It was the same thing. Like they got.
I heard, when you said soldier,
they got mixed up somewhere somehow, and they, basically hammered him just on the gun and like made an example of him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like. So anyway,
that's what they want to do, and that's what these incremental laws allow for. Because once they get their foot in the door, then they can expand on what they've already done. The NICS system has gone through multiple expansions, and that was all because we allowed it to take place in the first place. And all these laws, the red flag laws, and doing things to people between 18 and 21 differently than you're going to do things to people from 21 to 99. Why are you singling them out and harassing them and restricting their access? Because they're 18 to 21. They can vote. They can serve in the military. But yet you're telling me they can't own a rifle without being harassed more so than a 22-year-old?
Maybe that's the idea. Maybe the idea is to harass them more, to discourage gun ownership, to essentially, because again, they're kind of playing that long game, if you will. They educate your children. Guns are bad, all the way through kindergarten, all the way up to high school, young adulthood, all this other stuff. You don't miss what you didn't have. You're raised, guns are bad, and all they do is just kill, kill, kill. You start to see the numbers drop, you know what I mean, in terms of people wanting to own guns, and then they vote against guns, you know what I mean? And so maybe that is the reason. Maybe that is the reason to harass that particular age group to discourage them.
Yeah.
So
it all does center around harassment. Most of these gun laws do. And as you were saying, before we started recording, it's something we've said before. It's never a negotiation, right? There's no compromise here. When they say compromise, when Mitch McConnell says Republicans go sit down with the Democrats and compromise and find some solution because we need this if we're going to win. So for some stupid reason, he thinks this is going to help his Republicans win. That compromise means we give up something else, because a compromise implies both parties walk away with something of equal value and they're both happy. I'm never happy because I never get anything back. I never get anything in the compromise. All I do is get more rights pulled from me unwillingly. I
give them something and, I didn't get anything.
Right. Again.
Weird.
And again. And again.
And again.
But at least we're winning in the courts. And that, I want to end this on a good note. And this is why it's so important to vote, both at state level and at federal level. You must vote, because if you don't, it was just a perfect, series of events that led to those three justices being appointed under the Trump administration that put that court in a position to give us this most recent Second Amendment ruling and potentially more favorable Second Amendment rulings in the future. And so that is done by voting. You have to vote. Don't tell me that your vote doesn't count. That's nonsense. You have to vote, and you have to convince other people to vote. It's such a simple thing to do.
Yep.
And it's your civic duty. You cannot claim to be an American free citizen if you don't even partake in its political system.
Right.
You're an outsider, and I don't want to hear you complaining when bad things happen. All right, well, guys, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. I did want to make the names available of those Republicans, 14 in the House, 15 in the Senate, who betrayed you and became traitors to the Constitution by passing this legislation. A lot of you are going to be inclined to think that this legislation, we got off easy some way. No, we didn't. This is that incrementalism that we spoke about in the past, and it will only be used against us as we go forward. It just makes it easier for the anti-gunners to harass us and ultimately strip us of our rights. So please be politically active. If you guys would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button and support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, guys, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for 14 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care, guys.